If we do a close to an existing file, also known as the multiple year-end close, new accounts, maps, and groups are merged. Balances open, prior, forecast, and budget are rolled forward. Any accounts that are locked are unlocked. Annotation, tick marks, and commentary text are not copied again if the boxes are not checked down at the bottom. If the boxes are not checked, annotation, tick marks, and notes previously copied over are cleared. So keep that in mind on a multiple year-end close if you don't want to clear those items. If you attempt to perform a year-end close to an existing SmartSync file, an error message will be displayed indicating that this action cannot be performed and the year-end close will be canceled. Keep in mind, when we do a year-end close from a SmartSync child file, it's going to create a non-sync file. It will be a local file, and we'll be dealing with that towards the end of the presentation today. So the file path is available to us right here, and it's set based on my default path. We do have the ability to browse for a folder and browse for a file if we're closing out to an existing file. Or we can type in the name of the file. I'm going to start off by putting in year-end close roll forward, which is the name of this file. However, I'm going to update the date to next year so that I don't, well, let me do this year and I'll click OK. Now, it cannot perform year-end close to a SmartSync file. I happen to be in a SmartSync file. If that was a non-SmartSync file, I would have had a warning telling me that I'm closing to an existing, to the file that I'm currently in and prompting me to make sure I have a backup. I'm going to make this a 2013 file, so it is creating a new file for me. Then we get into our various other properties. Well, before I get into the other properties, the maximum length for a client file name is 100 characters, including spaces but excluding any extension. The total file path plus file name plus extension has a maximum length of 254 characters. So my options, compress prior year file. I check this box to compress the prior year file when I run the year-end close. So the 2012 file would end up being compressed with this checked. And with that checked, I do have the option to include my backup files for my case view documents. I'm not going to compress the file because I'm going to come back to that 2012 file in a moment. We can update the prior year balance data, and we'd select this option if you wanted the current year balances for this year's file to become prior year balances in the new year's file. So with this option selected, other basis adjustments are rolled into the new year's file. And we can view the other basis adjustments by drilling down on the prior year column in the working trial balance and then on the prior year adjustments column in the new year's file. We also have the ability to update next year's opening balance column. And when I have that selected, I can choose the type of balance that I'd like to update that with, whether it's zero, unadjusted, adjusted, report, consolidated, or any of my tax balances, the default being the consolidated balance. And when we are updating next year's opening balances, we do need to close out the retained earnings. Now, if there's only one retained earnings account, we can click the drop down here and it will show us all the balance sheet accounts and we can find the retained earnings account that we're closing out to. All the P&L accounts will be zeroed out, netting the difference to my retained earnings account. However, if this were a partnership or a multi-entity file, we do have the ability to create a multiple account distribution for my net income. And we specify the account number that we want to distribute it to, a minimum amount, maximum amount, or absolute amount going into that account. Now, when all is said and done, the percent column must accumulate to 100% before it will let us out of this dialog. We can also add other distributions here, and any account, any balance sheet account, for example dividends, can be closed out to any other balance sheet account. Let's say retained earnings. And I'll do 100% there. For my net income, I'll put that into retained earnings as well at 100%. So this is going to cause a multiple distribution. My dividends going to retained earnings and my net income going to retained earnings on the year-end close. You can add as many distributions and as many accounts that you're distributing a particular account to as is necessary in your file. So partnerships where you have contributions and drawings can all be closed out on the year-end close. Then we get into some of our other roll forward options. Here we have our roll forward forecast option. We select this option if you want the next year's forecast amounts in the current year file to become the current year forecast in the new year's file. Pardon me, the current year budget in current year file. We can update our budget with our forecast as well. And we can update our case view roll forward cells. So those cells in the cash flow area that I was showing you with the roll forward properties will be updated if this is selected. If this is not selected, we won't look at the case view document to deal with the case view roll forward cells. We also have the ability to roll forward budgets. By the way, it's also worth noting this option to update case view roll forward cells will also clear input paragraphs if the option to clear contents on roll forward has been enabled in the paragraph properties. With the budget selected, the current year budget amounts in the current file will become the prior year budgets in the new year's file. Working Papers also allows you to create custom balances. This is found under Tools, Options, Lists on the Working Paper side. When you create custom balances, you may also want to roll forward those custom balances. So we select this option to roll them forward based on whether the custom balance is set to either current past or current future balances. If a custom balance identifier is set to current past, the current year custom balance amounts in the current file become the prior year custom balance amounts in the New Year's file. If a custom balance identifier is set to current future, the next year's custom balance amounts in the current file become the current year custom balance amounts in the New Year's file. So it's treated like normal balances if it's current past, and it's treated like forecast balances if it's current and future selected. Then we have the choices of what we wish to include in next year's file. Options selected here affect all automatic documents on the document manager of next year's file. And if applicable, we select the checkboxes to include referencing, spreadsheet analysis balances, and completion information for programs and checklists in the next year's file automatically. Spreadsheet analysis data is available at the top. That will copy any spreadsheet analysis automatic documents content when selected. If it's deselected, the spreadsheet document will appear, but its content will be clear. Foreign exchange will be copied into next year's file as well, if we have that checked. Program insertion information. Program and checklist completion information, I don't recommend copying that because it indicates that you may have done something in the file that hasn't been done yet. Commentary text, that's nice to copy across so that you don't have to re-enter it. It's much easier to delete commentary than it is to have to retype it. And outstanding transactions. We specify roll forward options for journal entries with the outstanding transaction option selected. When that's selected, we can choose one or more accounts that may have outstanding transactions. So I'm going to choose my foreign bank and domestic bank accounts, which are bank accounts 102 and 103. Then we get into our annotations. I like to copy my document references. They tend to be fairly consistent from year to year, and I can, of course, change it if necessary. Take marks, once again, indicate something's been done, so I don't tend to copy those across, but you can if necessary. And notes, because it's easier to delete than re-enter. And I do the same thing in my case view documents. So once it's all selected, once all my settings are done, I'm ready to complete the year-end close roll forward to my new 2013 file. I'm going to click OK here, and it will take a moment as it creates the new file for me. I'm now in the 2013 file. It's going to be updating my balances momentarily, so I'll get a new year showing here with the 2012 to 2013, and my net income should switch to 0 because it's been closed out in the 2013 year. So this all takes a moment to work its way through, and if we have a lot of case view documents, keep in mind, because I'm updating all my case view documents, it might take a little bit longer. And as soon as it's finished, we will see the changes in the status bar down below. And sure enough, I'm now on the 12/31/2013, and a net income of 0 is showing in my file. Now let's have a look at the trial balance quickly, and note the opening balances for my accounts. My opening balances do compare to my prior year 2012 closing balances at the moment until we get down into the P&L where we see everything's been closed out to my retained earnings account. I have a balance of $166,423 in my retained earnings account, but let's say we have to go back into last year's file and make an adjustment. So now I'm back in the 2012 file, It's going to take a moment to open up for me. And remember, it is a sync file here. And now that I'm back in last year's file, I'm going to go into my adjusting entries, because if there are further transactions that are recorded in the prior year file, a second year-end close can be performed, and it's referred to, as I mentioned earlier, as a multiple year-end close, because we'll be closing out to the same new file. I'm going to post an adjustment, new adjustment, to cash sale, and I'll post that to my account 102, foreign bank, for $1 million. And I'll offset that to my sales account and close my adjustment. Now I'm going to go back to the engagement menu and select year-end close once again. Now this file exists that I'm closing to, so I can browse for that file, and that is my year-end close roll forward 12/31/2013 file that I just closed to previously. So it's going to recognize when I click OK without changing any of my settings, although I could. I'm going to click OK though, and it will recognize that I'm closing to a multiple year-end close. So I'll say OK. The outstanding transactions that were in my journals have already been transferred, so they won't be transferred again. I'll say OK to that as well. And it's going to go ahead and update my 2013 file for that extra transaction of $1 million, which means my cash account will be increased by $1 million, and my retained earnings account will offset that amount. Going to the trial balance in my 2013 file, we will see my cash balance has an increase of $1 million based on that extra adjustment, and my retained earnings is increased by $1 million. So it has maintained the extra work that would have been done in this file. Now that's handy if you're doing monthly write-up for your clients and the year-end work is not complete, but you want to continue doing the monthly work in the following year. There's other reasons that you may wish to apply that. Now, I've mentioned it a few times. The file that I was in is a Smart Sync file. Let me go back to that 2012 file. There's my 2012 file under Recent Files.